In the quick unboxing, we have the handheld, manual, screen protector, wipes for applying the screen protector, and a USB-A to USB-C cable. There are 4 color options available for this model, but I chose the silver one, specifically to compare with this silver GBA I have. The Anbernic RG35XXSP is priced at around $65 plus shipping, and I've left the link to the official website in the video description. Going over the layout, when closed there is nothing on top. On the back we have the shoulder buttons, a USB-C port for charging and peripherals, and a mini HDMI output for connecting to a TV or monitor. On the left we have the volume buttons. On the right there are the power and reset buttons. In the front there's a headphone jack and 2 memory card slots. And at the bottom there's a port for accessing the battery. Speaking of the battery, it has a 3,300 mAh capacity and will give you 6 to 8 hours of gameplay depending on what you're playing and the screen brightness level. This handheld uses the same processor as the 35XX family, which is the H700 with 1 GB of RAM. You'll be able to run all retro systems up to the original PlayStation without any problems, and even Dreamcast, Nintendo 64, and PSP, though these more demanding systems won't run 100% of their libraries. Additionally, this device lacks analog sticks, limiting gameplay for those systems. However, in my opinion, this device shines with 8, 16, and 32-bit systems. There's something very special and nostalgic about enjoying these games in this form factor. The postman delivered the 35XXSP when I was about to leave for the supermarket, and I decided to test it quickly. Big mistake. I spent almost 2 hours playing and gave up on going out. Who needs food when you have retro games? My first impressions were excellent. The first thing I noticed was the size. For some reason I thought it would be the same size as the Game Boy Advance SP, but it's a bit bigger. If you're used to the SP, you'll notice this right away. It measures almost 9 centimeters in length, about 8.5 centimeters in height, and it's roughly 2.7 centimeters thick. When fully opened it's around 16 centimeters. Here it is side by side with the Game Boy Advance SP, and here with other handhelds for comparison. The D-pad is completely different from what we've seen on other Anbernic devices. In fact, all the buttons are unique. The company really aimed to make this handheld as close as possible to the Game Boy SP. Aside from the size, the 2 D-pads are practically identical, with Anbernic's being matte and Nintendo's being smooth. The 35XXSP's D-pad is a bit over 21 mm, while the Game Boy's is just under 18 mm. I tested it thoroughly and found 0 issues with false diagonals. Initially it felt a bit strange, but within a few minutes I was throwing moves without problems. The D-pad, like all other buttons on this device, is clicky, which makes sense given its clamshell design. The travel distance of these buttons is quite short, specifically to avoid issues when closing the screen to prevent accidental pressing. The face buttons follow the same design as the D-pad. They have short travel and provide a super quick response. Honestly, there's not much to say about the shoulder buttons. They are also clicky with L2 and are too slightly elevated to help distinguish them. For this form factor they are positioned perfectly, which brings me to the ergonomics. These smaller devices are definitely not the most comfortable if you want to play for long periods, but among them, I found the 35XXSP to be one of the best. It is basically the same ergonomics as the GBA SP, but since it's a bit larger and thicker, it gives you a firmer grip. With the Game Boy I seem to hold the device mostly with my fingertips, making it unfeasible to support the device with the palms of my hands, especially if you have large hands. The 35XXSP is more substantial, providing more support for your hands. I played on it for more than 2 hours straight without any issues and could have kept playing even longer. Regarding build quality, I think Anbernic did an excellent job here. Like most of the company's other consoles, everything fits perfectly, making the device very solid. This is especially important considering the clamshell design. One highlight is the hinge. It opens and closes very smoothly. When you open it, just like the Game Boy, it locks into place at a certain angle. You can push it a bit further, and it locks again. Anbernic really did a great job here. The weight it is about 195 grams. The GuiSeagal with a cartridge is lighter at around 155 grams. Here we have a weight comparison with other devices. The screen is a 3.5-inch IPS LCD with a 4:3 aspect ratio and a 640 by 480 resolution, which is more than sufficient for the games you will play here. Comparing it with another device that has the same screen and parameters, I have the RG35XXSP Plus here. Looking at the two screens side by side, I can say they are practically identical. I'm pretty sure these two devices use the same screen, and if you find any difference, it would only be due to different manufacturing batches. I have no complaints about its screen. The games look beautiful on it. Regarding the software, Anbernic invested a bit more in this model, making it more optimized for this handheld. Basically, it's the same as the other 35XX models, but with some important differences and features. In addition to the basic options found in previous models like Game Rooms, RetroArch, Favorites, History, etc., we now have the App Center option. Just a note, as I mentioned RetroArch earlier, I recommend always starting your games from there. Forget Game Rooms as you have many more configuration options in RetroArch. But getting back to the App Center, go to Apps, and then accessing the memory card, you have some interesting options. Here you can turn on and off bezels, turn off the LED light, disable shaders, and much more. In the Quick Shutdown Set section, you can choose to shut down the console more quickly. Just hold down the corresponding button. On the next screen, choose what the console will do when you close it. Press Y to shut down completely or A to put it in standby mode. However, its standby mode is a bit tricky. It basically only turns off the screen, and I noticed it can drain a lot of battery. So unless you're going to stop briefly and return to playing soon, I found it better to choose the option to shut down completely, and I'll show you why. I have a game open here. Want to stop playing? Close the screen, and the lights will go out because it shuts down completely. It's time to play again. Just open the console and hold down the power button. After a few seconds, it resumes exactly where you left off. For me, this is the best way. You save extra battery, and when you come back, your game is always saved. It's time to see what this little device can do. All 8, 16, and 32-bit systems run smoothly and without issues. I really like the overlays, the frames that Anbernic added to the systems. The original Game Boy looks beautiful in this frame with applied shaders and the DMG coloration already set up. And let me tell you, there's something special about playing these retro systems on this device. One of the highlights is GBA. Despite the screen being a 4:3 aspect ratio, not the original GBA's 3:2, and despite the screen resolution not giving you perfect pixels, this didn't bother me at all. The frame and shader that Anbernic implemented make this system very faithful to the original, but with a better screen and brightness. Arcade games won't give you any problems running most titles from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. Dreamcast also works well, but remember you don't have an analog stick. The cool thing is you can click the power button and it switches the D-pad input from digital to analog. Although the experience isn't perfect, at least you'll be able to play games that require analog input to function. Nintendo DS also runs, but the experience isn't the best. Besides not having an analog stick to move the stylus and not having a touch screen, you'll need to keep switching between screens because squeezing two of them into this space isn't feasible for me. At least you can use the same feature I showed with Dreamcast to make the D-pad simulate an analog stick. But as I mentioned, the experience isn't the best. Nintendo 64 is the same thing. You'll be able to run games, but due to the lack of analog sticks you'll be limited to only a few titles because of the C buttons, which are usually mapped to the right analog stick. I don't recommend Nintendo 64 on this device. The original PlayStation works great here, and we can optimize the graphics. Just press the menu button, go to Core Options, and in GPU plugin turn on the Enhanced Resolution option. PS1 games look beautiful and super sharp. The last system I want to test is PSP. We have a widescreen system and a letterbox display, which isn't the best option. You have to choose between playing with a stretched screen or, like me, the correct aspect ratio but with black bars at the top and bottom. Many games will work well, but we also suffer from the lack of analog controls. Heavier games like God of War will need some frame skip to be playable. The Anbernic RG35XXSP is a special handheld in my opinion. It's hard to explain, but the experience in games on this device is unique and incredibly nostalgic if you've ever had a Game Boy Advance SP. It boasts an excellent screen, great build quality, and ergonomics that aren't quite as comfortable as larger consoles, but better than many small devices on the market, and even surpasses the original Game Boy SP. Its portability and HDMI output mean you can slip it into your pocket and take it to a friend's house with some Bluetooth controllers for a gaming session. Some people might be bothered by the lack of analog sticks, but honestly, that's not a problem for me. I think the focus here is on games from the 8, 16, and 32-bit eras, with a special bonus for PlayStation games which look stunning with optimized graphics. The Anbernic RG35XXSP has become one of my favorite handhelds of 2024. If you like this model, you might enjoy this video here. But before that, like, subscribe, and follow us.